I'm Alex Sharfin, and this is the Momentum Podcast, made for empire builders, game changers, trailblazers, shot takers, record breakers, world makers, and creators of all kinds. Those among us who can't turn it off and don't know why anyone would want to. We challenge complacency, destroy apathy, and we are obsessed with creating momentum so we can roll over bureaucracy and make our greatest contribution. Sure, we pay attention to their rules, but only so that we can bend them, break them, then rewrite them around our own will. We don't accept our destiny, we define it. We don't understand defeat because you only lose if you stop, and we don't know how. While the rest of the world strives for average and clings desperately to the status quo, we are the minority, the few who are willing to hallucinate there could be a better future. And instead of just daydreaming of what could be, we endure the vulnerability and exposure it takes to make it real. We are the evolutionary hunters, clearly the most important people in the world, because entrepreneurs are the only source of consistent, positive human evolution, and we always will be. Thanks for being here. This podcast is Missing Meetings is Hurting You. Now, I tried for ever to come up with a better title for this because I'm challenged by the fact that I think so many entrepreneurs have acquired this aversion to having any meeting that I might be driving people away with the very title of this podcast, Missing Meetings is Hurting You. But I felt compelled to do this one this week because this one got a little I guess I got a little emotionally connected to this topic this week because a friend of mine who runs a really fast growth company, just an absolute genius, has been reading a lot of materials from a coach that I went to a few years ago. And one of the things that coach says is that in your business, you should have no scheduled meetings, like no rescheduled meetings, like weekly meetings, monthly meetings, and like no bureaucracy. So no, like that's his quote. But see, the problem is there's a difference between having effective meetings and building a bureaucracy. And so, but he says them at the same time. And so entrepreneurs all say, oh, great, I hate bureaucracy, so I won't have any meetings. Here's the challenge. That just doesn't work. And let me present you with a counter argument, because I know every entrepreneur out there wants to hear, hey, you don't have to have any meetings scheduled at all. I get it. I know how much we all hate meetings. I was a Fortune 500 consultant for over 10 years. I can't tell you how many times I sat through a meeting where nobody knew why they really were there or what the outcome was. And it was one of those meetings where like everybody just does their role, but nobody really understands why they're still doing it. And it's a complete waste of time. I know. And for entrepreneurs, meetings make us uncomfortable. We don't like the whole structure. We don't like to do meetings. So it's easy to sell us complete garbage, like you don't have to have any regular meetings in your company. Here's why. If you have a clear meeting cadence, and by the way, we don't even train meetings. We call the right type of meetings targeted interactions because there's a targeted outcome. It's not a meeting, because meeting implies we get together and we meet. No, this is a targeted interaction. We're getting together, we're interacting for a clear outcome. And for targeted interactions and the content we teach, there's 4 things to these. First, there's a clear intention, like you know exactly what you're trying to do coming out of the meeting. They're scheduled in advance, so everybody knows it's coming so they can win in the meeting. They're primed, so everyone knows, like we actually remind people coming up to these meetings so that they never walk in and unprepared. Guys, we want our people to win. And then they're choreographed. Every meeting has the exact same agenda. We call it choreography because what happens is the entire team learns the choreography, they anticipate the meetings, and then things start really going forward fast. Now, see, that type of a level playing field for your team, having clear meetings on a clear schedule with exactly what's expected, that creates a level playing field for your team. Now they know when they're going to have to communicate. They know when they're going to measure. There's built-in milestones to their job. And they know when they're checking in. As long as you have a clear outcome for the meeting, you know what everybody's supposed to be doing, then this is going to move your team forward. The other thing is there's a clear expectation of timing and milestones, because you've already set up meetings, a communication cadence around how things are going to happen. So when you have a clear meeting cadence, this will change the way that you do business. Here's another reason. If you go back through your life, if you just think about any time that you had momentum in your life, you're going to find that it always included predetermined milestones, meetings, and some type of routine. Now, I know when you started your business, it was crazy, but think back, like meditate on it. You'll find you had a routine. We all did, because in the beginning, when you're doing everything, you have to create it as you go along. Whether you wrote it down or not, you were doing something that was routine, and then that created momentum for you. You know, periods of momentum in people's lives are like when a lot of women tell me it's when they got pregnant, or when they first had a child. Like, there definitely was a routine to it. There was a series of meetings. You met with your doctor. You know, there's definitely a way that having those clear expectations for your team will put them in a period of momentum. And then here's the other side, is that we need to look at this from the team perspective in a business. Even if you have a small team, when you don't have meetings or a clear process for communication, here's what happens. So one, if you grow a decent sized company, people are going to have the meetings anyway. You're just not involved. So if you don't have a clear process for how people are going to get things done together, if you don't have a clear cadence for communication, you're going to have an informal process or an informal cadence for communication. And those are terrible. That's why people start hating meetings. Because informal processes where it's got a minute and where it's constantly just doesn't feel right, it feels like an interruption, it drives everybody nuts. When you don't have meetings or a process, when you buy into this thing that you don't have to have meetings, here's what happens for your team. There's no expected clear communication schedule, because when you have weekly meetings where you update on projects, then everybody knows what's going on. When you have monthly meetings where everyone knows how the company did, clear metrics, sharing of the metrics, understanding of what's important to you, what happens is, every time that you communicate to your team, it's like getting word from on high. Whether it's all day, it's like too much. And when it's not on a schedule, it's always seen as an interruption, but they don't know like what's really important. You can come out and have a meeting with them one day or the next day, because here's what happens. A lot of entrepreneurs don't like to have meetings. As a result, maybe you haven't been having pre-scheduled meetings. You're running your business on the fly. That is called personality management. It is one of the hardest ways to run a company, because it's also very transactional. So it's personality management where you're telling everyone what to do. And it's absolutely transactional where you are telling people what to do, then you're seeing if it got done, and then you're telling them what to do again. That is the most painful way to run a business. And the way to transform your business and be a transformational leader instead of a transactional manager is to shift. And you can go back and listen to the podcast on this, but shift to giving clear outcomes, coaching success along the way, and then getting leverage results. Well, when you have clear meetings cadences, people know exactly how to communicate with you, and then they know when you're going to communicate with them. This is crucial to them having momentum. And here's another reason, like, I want to make sure that none of you buy into this garbage, because I'll tell you the right type of meeting. Like I said, it's a targeted interaction, but let me explain a little bit more about that in a second, because here's what will happen. What will happen is, instead of your team having clear expectations, knowing when they're going to be measured, knowing when to communicate with you, having milestones, you're going to do this crazy thing where you just go randomly check with people. And here's the problem. You are the CEO. You are the entrepreneur in charge. You're one of the partners. You're running things, or you're a leader in a company. You're managing people. You have responsibilities they don't have. I want you to understand something. What you say will be heard through a megaphone, and what you do will be seen through a microscope. So when you go out and do random meetings, it always raises pressure and noise for people. And here's what, there's this term, management by walking around. Let me share a secret for growing really happy teams with you. Don't ever buy into that garbage. Management by walking around is insanity. I know that this is one of the most like long-standing management practices or leadership practices. I know that like there's consultancies that actually train this. It's just complete BS. Like you've got to. I was a consultant on both sides of the table to the CEO, but then I also worked with the teams, and I can tell you that from the team perspective, nobody pulls off management by walking around. It is always seen as first, it's an interruption. Like, why am I getting interrupted right now? Because it was random to the person in the chair. And the more often, the more random it feels. It's like your team does not like this. They want to have a routine. They want to have a clear schedule. They want to be in momentum. The second thing that they feel, so first it feels like an interruption, then it feels like an investigation because what are you going to do? You're going to end up asking questions. You're not just going to make definitive statements. So you ask a few questions, you want to find out what's going on. And then the more it lasts, it feels like an interrogation. So you've got interruption, investigation, interrogation. Your team's not happy. And consultants will convince you that managing this way and leading this way, it like connects you to your team and you're going to build relationships and you're going to get to know them better. No, you can't do that. I'm sorry. It doesn't work. Like your team doesn't want random interruptions from you. They don't want interrogations. They want a clear way to win. And when you set up a clear cadence of targeted interactions in your company, where they have clarity and they know when they're going to be measured, when they're going to communicate, when they're going to give updates, then they can win in a system like that. They know when you're going to communicate with them. They're not waiting for word from on high. And here's the key. You are infinitely more likely to be understood about where the company is going, what's really important to the entire team, what you really want the organization to know about what's happening. And they will hear it better because they know it's coming. There's a reason people, like episodic shows because they know what's coming. There's, when if you watch Friends enough times, and this is, I know there's some people listening who probably won't even know what that is, but if you watch Friends enough times, there's a formula to exactly how that show works. And yet you watch it again because it's familiar. Well, how much would your company change if you made your meetings that familiar for your team? And they felt that comfortable in the meetings where they could perform at their best. They could give you their best input. They could really give you everything you need to grow the business. Because let's be honest, guys, once you get past a few people, if you're making every decision on your own, if you're not getting team input, if you don't have a clear communications cadence with that team, then you're making mistakes that you could avoid because if they can communicate with you in a way that they can win, you're going to hear way more about what's going on in that company. And this doesn't mean that if you've gotten to 50 or 100 or 200 or 300 without clear meaning communication cadence, that you're winning. What it means is you're overcoming the lack of clear structure that every team needs to be in momentum. And you're probably doing that because you have a really good product and you have a really good market and you've found a way to sell really well. But I can tell you that looking at a hyper clear cadence where everyone knows what's going on, it changes the entire business. Because when everyone understands the structure in which they can win, everyone in the company gets into momentum. Think back, to any period of momentum in your life, and you had a clear outcome. You had transparency, there was measurement, there was some sort of structure, some type of timing you understood along the way. And there was accountability for what you were doing and the people around you were doing. And when teams have a clear communication cadence, they have a disproportionate habit of winning like crazy. I work with some incredible companies. Like right now, I'm working with companies that I've started with when they've been sub 10 million. And actually one that I started with when they were sub, I think, 2 million. And they are now hitting run rates where they're at the over $10 million mark. And one of the processes I use every time is putting clear communication practices in place, which means clear meetings with clear understanding of when we're going to get updates from the CEO on the schedule. And when this happens, It's amazing how teams show up, how they are excited to work, how they won't go home, and how in a lot of cases you start getting insane amounts of discretionary time. And it, like I, you know, in one of the companies I coach, they have to talk to their teams about taking weekends off because they're so pumped to work for the company that they're working 7 days a week. And I know that happens in meetings without a clear cadence, but I've been doing this for a long time. And the fastest way to get to this ideal condition for a company is to have a clear communication cadence. And here's the ideal condition for the company. When I was a management consultant, sometimes I was asked to evaluate organizations. And a practice I would use is to go into the company and I would find the most entry level or lowest paid, because let's be honest, a lot of times I'm looking for the lowest paid person who's actually a W-2 employee and not some type of a contractor. So there might be like a cleaning service that is contracted, but I'm trying to find like who's that entry level person. In a lot of companies, it's like a receptionist or somebody who's an office manager or someone who's in a warehouse or someone who's in some type of entry level creative position. And what I would do in every organization is go from that entry level designer to the guy who works in the warehouse. And I would ask if they knew where the company was going. And I knew that if I found an organization where all the way down to everyone in the organization had some understanding of where it was going, I knew I was talking to an extraordinary company and that they had a clear communication cadence and their team had a clear structure to win within. And then I would follow up on that hypothesis by asking more targeted questions. And my evaluations were really easy because if you find a company where everyone knows, has some idea of where the company's going, that company's going to win. I'll ask you right now, in your organization, does everyone have real clarity about where you're going? Do they know how they're going to be measured? Do they know what to expect? Are you giving them everything they can to win? If not, don't buy into this no meetings or bureaucracy strategy. Here's what you do. You have minimum effective dose meetings. You have a clear intention. You schedule them in advance. You prime them so everyone knows how to win. They know what the meeting's about. And then you have clear choreography where you get in and you get out and the meeting takes as long as it has to, not as long as you scheduled. And when you do this, I'll share some math with you. We show CEOs how to do this because here's what every CEO needs. They need more time. I just had a group here in town this week because when you start running a business and growing a team, the one thing you always feel like you could use more of is time. And I'm not saying maybe time in the business, but here's what all of us, it's like, I want more time with my spouse, or more time with my kids, there's somewhere in our life that time could help us. And I've coached hundreds of entrepreneurs and at all different levels. And one of the things that I can tell you is extraordinarily statistically similar is that when an entrepreneur does not have a clear communications cadence, they're using about 50 to 70% of their time to manage and grow the business because they're doing it by personality. They're doing what I said earlier, the to do, check if it got done, to do again, and their team really can't anticipate their moves like they should. And here's what we do with clear meeting guidelines and making them targeted where you don't get off track. You go from spending 50 to 70% of your time, which by the way, most CEOs work between 2,000, which is very low, and 3,000, which is still kind of low, but that's the highest measure I use. And so if it's 50 to 70% of your time, we're talking 1,000 to 1,500 hours a year. And for most of you, it's probably more than 1,500 hours or 1,400 hours a year. It's probably more. It's probably higher than that because you're working more hours and the percentage is probably higher. And so what we do is with targeted interactions, we show people how to do this in about 300 hours a year because you don't want to commit to no meetings. You want to commit to clear meetings with a clear understanding of what's going on, where everyone can win and your team feels fully supported. And when you do that, you can take all of the time that you've been spending without wanting to and without realizing it on personality-based management, and you can transition it into transaction or transition transformational management. So you go from personality to process, you will shift from transactional to transformational leadership. And when you do that, everything in the business will change because everyone, not just you, can start anticipating where things are going, knowing how to win. They get comfortable winning. They get more and more, winning starts feeling easier and easier. And if there's anything you want to do as a CEO, you want to condition your team to win. Believe me, I've had both. I've had companies that have flown up like crazy, but I've also had companies that, due to market conditions or due to other stuff, we've gone down. And when a team is winning, it is infinitely easier to lead them and to move them in the right direction. When a team starts losing or feeling like they're losing, it's near impossible. And so having this clear structure gives every person in your business an equal opportunity to win and to move the company forward. So don't buy into the whole no meetings thing, but do make sure that you're doing it in the minimum effective dose possible, because that means you're not wasting your team's time. You're not wasting your time. You're just creating a structure where everyone can win. If you're running a business where this is an issue, where you want to understand how this works and be able to, instead of feeling like you're pushing or pulling your business every day, you want to be able to call your shot and have everyone on the team support you in getting there in a clear, cohesive way. We should talk. Contact our office. You can just go through our website. It's sharfin.com and let us know how big your company is and what you're dealing with. And I'd love to connect with you. We have a mastermind that is just blown up in the past few weeks. I think Katie booked 6 calls for it today. So we are helping entrepreneurs put this process in place, and it's been proven. I've tested it on Fortune 500 companies. I've tested it with startups, and we're now in the process of helping several businesses, like I said, go from the low 7-figure or maybe around 7-figure range to the 10-figure run rate. And what's also important is a lot of businesses that were around 700 are now breaking into the 1 million plus. So if you're at around 700 or more and growing, and you know you have more opportunity, and you know the right infrastructure around you would help you get there, you've created enough opportunity that you can't fulfill it right now. From 700 up to well over 10 million, the mastermind we have will help you radically change how you're leading and radically change how much you're transforming your company. Thanks for being here with you. I look forward to sharing again with you tomorrow.